For this afternoon, I want to share some few thoughts on Genesis, on the Genesis account chapter 37 until 50, where we see the story of Joseph. Where we see the story of Joseph. The main scripture was read by our leader, by our brother. I wouldn't be reading again. In this story, we see how Joseph persevered in times of all these struggles that he goes through, that he faces through. And in this story of Joseph, it tells us that life is not always a bed of roses. And as a Christian, we are always faced by different days and different trials in our life. In this story, the story of Joseph, we see that until the age of 17, he enjoyed the love of his father, the embrace of his father. As the youngest, he was really loved by his father, and he was really cared by his father. And the dreams that he have, and the love of the father that he have, that brings jealousy, that brings hatred to his brother, to his brothers. And in this story, we see how he persevered through faith in all his trials, in all the temptations, and in his life, the 13th miserable life that he goes through as a slave and imprisoned. Therefore, it teaches us that true perseverance is an active faith that trusts God's providence through the mystery of suffering. It means actively holding on to the faith, not just by waiting passively, but by deeply trusting that God is in control. Even when experiencing suffering, when answers from God seem delayed, it recognizes the real endurance involves believing in God's goodness and timing, especially when life is difficult or the fulfillment of promise is not immediately seen. Perseverance does not ignore suffering. Instead, it faces hardship with trust in God. Suffering is seen not as a sign of God's absence, but as a mysterious part of His plan that God can develop character, hope, and deeper dependence on God. And we as a Christian, this story teaches us that in all our lives, in all our suffering, especially as a foreigner, as a foreigner living here, the faith that we have in God should be the foundations of our lives living in this foreign land. So that through our exemplary life, many people will know the true God that we worship, the God that is filled with love. Thou our prayers, thou our wants and desires, thou is our seeking of what we seek from God may not be answered like the story, like Joseph. Though he waited for 13 years and his prayers, his search for God seems delayed. We may also seem delayed in our prayers, in our life, but always trust God as Joseph did. And therefore, I want to entitle my first subtopic as Perseverance, when God seems silent. Perseverance, when God seems silent. We know that the story of Joseph in chapter 37, his life does not start in palace, or as a life that is filled with joy and happiness. Though we have the love of the Father until he is 17 years old. But after 17 years, his life changes. the calamities befall him. He was in the pit. His brother's he was thrown into the pit by his brothers. His life, the misery of his life started from there. He was betrayed. He was sold for silver, just 20 shekels of silver. And history reminds us that God's favor does not always exempt us from suffering. But perseverance begins when understanding ends. And it's really true. When we fail to understand God's plan, the plan of God in our lives, the faith that we have in God needs to grow deeper. The search that we have for God needs to go deeper. In this Joseph's story, we know that Joseph had not prophetic word explaining why he had to suffer all this imprisonment or why he was to be sold as a slave. Yet he believed in the covenant promise of God that was given to his forefathers. Likewise, the Christians, as the believer, we need to learn, and we must learn to trust God's hidden hand when His face, when God's love is unseen, when God's promises is unseen or is unfulfilled. And faith is not proven in clarity, but is in confusion. Joseph Pete teaches us that divine silence does not mean divine absence. Though he was not there when he was thrown into the pit, it doesn't mean that God does not see him. It does not mean that God's life is not in him. But God is always with him. God is always with us when we draw closer to him and when we live for God in our lives. And the same God who was absent in Joseph when he was in the pit, when he was in Dothan, searching for his brothers, and where he was sold to the Ishmaelites, still God is with him, and God was with him. Therefore, when we find ourselves in the pit, misunderstood, rejected, or forgotten, remember that perseverance begins by believing that God is still writing, even when the page looks blank in our lives. And Job have clearly states in chapter 13, verse 15, that thou he slay me, yet will I hope in him. And such must be our faith in God. Though the world forsake me, though everyone leaves me alone, though while I was forgotten, forsaken, my faith in God and my love for God will always be in my heart. And that should be the foundation of our Christian's life. And I have entitled my second subtopic as Perseverance, Integrity when Tested by Fire. Perseverance, integrity when tested by fire. When he was sold to the Ishmaelites, he was sold again to Potiphar as a slave. And the story that was well known to us, that as God was with Joseph, Potiphar was in favor with Joseph, and he was given everything to look after his house. And when he was tempted, he cannot be tempted, but whatever may come our way. He resisted everything. And Potiphar's wife could not tempt him, could not seduce him. because his soul, the soul of Joseph, was strongly anchored in the fear of God. For he knows that even in this unseen time, God is with him. God sees everything. Therefore, perseverance demands moral constancy in the world that rewards compromise. The faith that we have in God, the belief that we have in God, should not be compromised by the rewards of this world, by the fame of this world. But we should be firm like Joseph did. We should be firm in our faith, in our moral holiness, like Joseph. We know that many can endure hardships, but only few maintain the holiness of hardship. It means that many people endure suffering with resentment, with complaining, or losing hope. But we as a Christian, the chosen people, needs to endure hardships as an opportunity in our lives to draw closer to God, to our God. And this Joseph teaches us that the greatest victory is not escape, but endurance with integrity when he was in Potiphar's house. And we know that God does not rush in refining process, in refining us. And this is also true in the life of Joseph. When he was imprisoned, it does not mean that God is delaying his promise, that God is delaying his justice. Yet it teaches us that it was like a classroom for Joseph, where God wants him to learn humility, when God wants him to learn about love, about leadership, and about dependence on God in the prison. Therefore, in the prison station, when faithfulness seems unrewarded, understand that God is forming in you the kind of strength that success can give. And this clearly states, and this clearly was supported by James in James chapter 1 verse 3. For you know that the testing of a faith produces perseverance. And let your faith persevere. Let your faith in God never be forsaken, be moved, be shaken, but whatever comes your way. And the last point that I want to share with you is perseverance, humility, when promoted by providence. We see that when Joseph was promoted to the second highest ruler of the Egyptian in Egypt, he did not forget the God who was with him in his suffering. He never forsake, he never abandoned the God that was with him in all the hardships that he faces. And it teaches that prosperity can be a greater test than poverty. And it's true for us. And Joseph passed both. Joseph passed both the test during his poverty and during his prosperity. In both his struggles and in both his fame, God is always in his heart. He never left God. He never forsake God. And God never forsake him as well. For it says that God was with Joseph everywhere that he goes. Therefore, the perseverant Christian recognizes that promotion is not the end of perseverance. Yet, it is another form of stewardship. The riches that we have, the fame that we have, the promotion that we have in our works, in our lives, God is teaching us to use that to use that opportunity in serving God, in spreading God's love to God's people, as Joseph did. And we also know that Joseph's humility before his brothers, who have sold him as a slave, and his forgiveness of his brothers for the crime that they have committed to him, and his acknowledgement when he says that God sent me before you to preserve life, revealed a heart matured by grace. For an ordinary people like me, it is impossible to forgive, to forget, and to love the people, the brothers who have sold me as a slave to other people. When I received such promotion as Joseph did to the second highest leader of the Egyptians, as an ordinary Christian, as to my view, it will be impossible to forgive such brothers in my life. But Joseph did the impossible by forgiving them, by loving them as his blood and as his flesh. As God has loved him, his love for his brothers who have wronged him is never far from him. And we are also asked to do the same. For Christ, as the only Son of God, who came to this earth to die for sinners like me, he was rejected like Joseph did. He was mourned. He was mocked. And he died on the cross for sinners like us. Yet, his love for us grows greater. And we are to be like Christ, being having the forgiving heart, being having a heart full of love, full of humility. I believe such is a must for each of us as a Christian to have such kind of heart. And we know that perseverance is not completed, not merely by enduring pain, but by transforming pain into purpose. Such life was the life of Joseph. The pain, the suffering, the enslavement, the imprisonment teaches him to endure for a purpose. Not for our purpose, but for the purpose of God. He has endured everything. And the ultimate expression of perseverance is forgiveness. The forgiveness that Joseph had for his brothers. The love that he had for his brothers, despite of the crime that they have done. Despite of the bad things that the brothers have done for him. His love for his brothers is never felt in his heart. Therefore, I want to conclude my sermon by encouraging us that whatever perseverance, whatever hardships, whatever long-suffering that you and I have, perseverance in our faith, in our love, should always be in us. And it should be a faith of motion, not a faith that is static, but a faith of motion. It should be a stubborn trust that even when life seems unfair, God is still unfolding a story greater than our pain. Like Joseph, the persevering Christian endures when forgotten, remains pure when tempted, forgives when wrong, and worships when lifted. Every trial becomes a thread in God's tapestry of redemption. Our part is to keep believing, keep obeying, and keep waiting. Because God, in His perfect timing, every beat, every failure, every of our fall will lead us into a purpose. The purpose that prepares for us for greater God's glory. And in James 1:4, it says that let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Let your perseverance, let your faith, let your love, let your humility get matured in God, so that we'll be incomplete without lacking anything. So that our life here on this earth may be a life that is pleasing to God, pleasing to His people, and we may able to serve for God's glory. And may God bless each one of us to be like Joseph, who persevere, who endure, and who never forsake God. Into